Rasputin, the Russian queen.
Is that your takeaway?
What, that I'd rather have watched the Rasputin episode than this episode.
Is that your takeaway?
Yes.
What?
That's my takeaway from this episode. I'd rather have watched any other episode of Doctor Who than this episode. That's my takeaway.
Okay.
Okay,
why?
I think we're coming in. I honestly, I saw your message that you said you're gonna love this, so I feel like maybe we have very, very different opinions.
Yeah, I think we might have very different opinions.
I hated this episode a lot. I thought it was terrible.
What are you talking about? Why?
I really, 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 really didn't like it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
It sucked.
What about it sucked?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Are you sure you weren't just having a shit day?
There was definitely a lot of that yesterday. Yeah, I had a really bad headache. There was a lot of the first half of this episode was great. The second half of this episode sucked.
Okay.
I feel like maybe they changed writers halfway through. That's what I feel like happened.
Can you point out anything specific?
Yeah, they started off. They got into like this sort of. They got the. Okay, so
are you about to do an entire plot recap?
Yeah.
I was thinking instead of. I think so much happened this episode that if we did the. I just want to talk about my highlights. And I think my highlights might be most of the episode because so much happened.
I feel like they got in like the toy makers back from like OG Doctor Who.
Yeah. And
he was really great.
He was so good.
And
he was so fucking good. Holy shit. Oh man. Oh, it was great.
Well, he was great at first. Because he was doing lots of very evil things, and he was being really sort of spooky and evil.
And then
at the end, he was kind of lame.
Why?
Because he just sort of was really shit, and then he lost really badly. And then it was over.
But, like, it was so much fun. He did a really cunty dance. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And then he was like, it was...
Yeah, because he was like Doctor Who's Q, except funnier. and then it got to like 45 minutes into the episode, and then it was just bad.
And then they beat him, and then we resolved the episode.
Yeah. Badly.
Why was it bad? Was it because they didn't do it in a funny and interesting or like a gotcha way?
They didn't do it in an interesting way at all.
The Doctor didn't pull a gotcha, so it wasn't interesting or good.
Yeah, there was no gotcha. There was no sciencey explanation. They just really badly tossed the ball around.
I thought the playing catch was hilarious. I thought it was a great way for them to defeat him. Because
but they didn't.
Okay,
they didn't even throw the ball like actually throwing. It was just some really badly shot shots of them playing catch.
Well, because none of them can catch. I watched the behind the scenes, so they had to fake do really weird catches, and it was really funny.
And then suddenly, the toy maker doesn't catch the ball.
I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect because
it was terrible.
Because they stopped trying to win. The characters stopped trying to win, and they were just playing around and having fun. Pretty obviously indicated by the fact that one of the doctors almost knocks out. We're talking spoilers. One of the doctors almost knocks out the other one, or makes the other doctor lose, even though they're on the same team. I was thinking about it later, and I was like, oh, they won because they stopped trying to win and they just started playing and having fun, because the whole point of the... And then they beat the toy maker because they were just like having fun and having a good time and like relaxing and playing, and it was... And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of a nice way for that to have happened.
No, that wasn't very clear.
Especially considering the toy maker was like this omnipotent, like, you can't outsmart him, you can't outdo him. He'll just fucking kill you, lol. And but he was also serving sick cunt the whole way in the most beautiful possible way. And so I don't know, I thought it was really appropriate. Especially considering, all right, okay, there were like some very cool things happening this episode that I want to talk about. Can I talk about them?
Yeah.
All right. Number one, this episode was very frantic. It was very frantic. It was very like high. It wasn't high energy the whole way, but it didn't pause. Like, the pacing of the episode was very much like, okay, we're starting with Stooky Bell gets picked up in the shop. After that happens, we go back to the doctor. Everyone's like, being weird. London's gone crazy, and then Unit shows up. They get glorped over by Unit, and then they figure out the Unit thing, and then they go to the past, and then they talk to the guy, and they do all the things in his House of Wonders, and then they escape the House of Wonders, but then they get the backstory. The backstory happens, and then they're like, oh shit, he's gone to the future, and they also have to run out there, and then they go back to the future, and then that whole future stuff happens, where he shows up and serves a million cunts on screen, and it's the best thing ever. And then he goes outside, and then and also, like, there's brief moments where Donna's like, hey, you're clearly not okay, Doctor. This is clearly this is you need to chill. You need to, like, stop for a bit. Like, you gotta, like, pause. But this whole episode, there's no pauses. Like, she tries to stop him to talk to him, and he just keeps fucking going. Like, the pacing of this episode is just, like, so chaotic and frantic, and I was like, this is so perfect, because the whole episode is about the Toymaker, because he's been unleashed on the galaxy, and he's like this force of chaos and, like, energy, and the whole episode is like, the music is amazing as well, and it's there's points where it's, like, kind of frantic, but it also kind of doesn't stop, and the whole like, up until the point where they beat the Toymaker, and the Toymaker goes, and then they pause, and that's when the pacing finally slows down, and they have a moment, and they chill out, and it's like, okay, we're okay, things are okay, we're gonna take some time, and I just thought that was so good.
It's like, it was like the perfect thing of the Doctor's sort of whole life since stealing the TARDIS as well. That's kind of like the whole sort of plot of the episode as well, of like, hey Doctor, you haven't actually sort of really taken a time to slow down at all since you stole the TARDIS. You've just been running and running and running and running, and since the Time War and everything, you've just been running and flying through space and going on all these crazy adventures, and you've lost people, and you just keep running and pushing and fighting and going and going and going and going, because that's all you can ever do. Is just the only way you can ever keep going is just by running headfirst into this constant danger, because you've never taken a time to stop, and that sort of that pacing matches that sort of thing that they were talking about throughout the episode as well.
I think since Eccleston, there has been this theme of, like, the Doctor being increasingly traumatized.
Yeah, and I love that, because they touched on that in this episode as well, which I absolutely loved, because the Toymaker was teasing the Doctor, being like, talking about the past companions, being like, oh, after you, Donna, there was Amy, and then and Amy and Rory, and they got
Died to
touched by the weeping angels,
angel.
and then she died, and then came Clara, and then she got killed by a raven, and she died.
But that's all right, isn't it?
But yeah, and the doctor was like, but Amy and Rory lived out the rest of their lives until they got old, and they were like, well, that's all right then. and
like
and
that
then he
whole
was
scene
like,
also slowly gets faster and faster as they go and more intense. The
yeah.
whole thing about Toymaker is like focusing in on the Doctor just constantly being this like increasingly spiraling out of control in his life. It's just so good that they focused on that. And I also think it's RTD's way of like showing up and saying, hey, I'm here in a show where it feels like for a very long time it's just been it's turned a little bit into like a monster of the week. Nothing ever changes. There's the Doctor has what's the problem of the week he's fighting this week, and if there's some character change, it's not that permanent, apart from the fact that he's getting increasingly traumatized. RTD shows up and goes, hey, we're going to talk about this, and we're actually going to address it, and there's going to be some significant change within this episode, not like the arc of an entire season where we're just dragging this one plot point out. And it's really entertaining, and I think it's like RTD's way of saying like, hey, we're gonna have an actually interesting show about these characters. It's going to feel like a concrete setting where things change and develop, which is very exciting to me.
Yeah, I do feel like I totally agree. I do feel like the puppet bit where they were doing the Doctor's sort of past companions bit, totally missed opportunity though to mention Yaz and co, and mention it could have been like, oh, and here was Yaz, and you really loved Yaz.
That would have been
you
funny
never said
as
anything.
hell.
You never said anything, and then it was too late. And that would have been
so funny. Oh my god, that would have been so funny.
They should have fucking done that.
Yeah.
Cowards.
Would have been hilarious.
Oh my god.
Also didn't mention Rory. I know they only had an hour or whatever in the episode, but kind of sad because that was such a fun and interesting scene once they reached like the depths of Toymaker's lair. He's telling the Doctor's story, and they're like, we're going to cover 3 or 4 companions, and they mentioned some other stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of weird because they did like Amy, Clara, Belle, and then completely skipped all of
Martha.
All of the companions.
Wait, Martha was before.
From Jodie's era, because Jodie like hung around with tons of people.
Yeah. I think they
just
sort of
there's the flux, and it's like, well, fair enough, because the flux thing was like extremely impactful, but like there was a lot of people that you just kind of just went, I'm not going to mention any of these people.
Yeah.
And you also didn't mention Rory.
Rory.
And you did mention River. I think maybe Rory was.
How could you mention Amy and not Rory? Rory's like the more fun one.
Why not say Amy and Rory?
Rory's the reason Amy's like as fun as a companion as she is, because Rory's
I feel like Rory. I feel like they did say. I feel like Rory did get like mentioned by one of them, but like they specifically just said like Amy at first, and then
they didn't say Rory. I maybe.
I feel like
I think they just said she died of old age.
No, I feel like one of them said like, oh, Amy and Rory lived out there. I feel like somebody did say. Yeah. I feel like somebody did say Rory's name in the like scene, but like it was very specifically highlighting Amy alone for like the majority of it.
But yeah,
it was kind of dumb because Amy and Rory were like companions for like 3 seasons or something. I'm rewatching it right now. The whole Matt Smith,
stuck
Amy
around.
Rory things. They stuck around forever.
Can't have Amy without her house husband.
Yeah. They were badass, and they were together, and they were there forever. And you can't don't disrespect Rory like that, okay? Jeez.
All right, more amazing parts of this episode. The villain of the week. The villain of this episode was hate speech. It was hate. It was like racism, hate speech, conspiracy theories, kind of the internet. It was just incredibly.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, like, they were like, "Oh, the toy maker's destroying the world. How is he doing it? The image of." Oh God, I wrote down the specific.
Well, he made everybody think they were right in 2023.
That's the explanation for why they're like this. But what they say is that he burned an image into screens, into screens, and any screens exposed to it were like connected and spread like a virus. And he burned the image of Stooky Bill, which has been driving people mad. So he effectively, televisions have been burning like into people's brains this like laugh that's been driving people mad, aka televisions have been driving people mad since they were invented, and it's slowly been happening across the history of time until modern day, where the entire world has become connected, and now that all screens are connected, it's driving the entirety of humanity insane. With like, the explanation is everybody thinks they're right, but it's basically like if you think about what they're saying, it's like, oh, all screens are driving people crazy, except the crazy is them turning into incredibly hateful people who will say awful things to each other. And you're like, oh, it's not the toy maker, they're just talking about screens and the modern day internet. It's not. I just thought it was really entertaining that the villain of this episode was people being hateful and saying awful things on the internet. And the plot of this episode,
Twitter.
The plot of this episode was essentially like the Doctor Who, like shaking his old man cane and being like, "Fucking TV screens! I knew they were bad. They've been turning us all into horrible monsters ever since they were invented."
It's so
I told you it was a mistake.
The BBC runs this little ad before Doctor Who that's like, oh, is it? Oh, the boy with square eyes. TV screens make your eyes square, and everybody shies away from the boy with square eyes. And this whole sort of thing about screens turning your eyes square, but it's about what's on them that matters, basically. Like this whole sort of spiel, and that they're sort of promoting the BBC and the BBC's content.
Yeah, it's like a weird sort of self-advert.
Yeah, self-advert about saying, oh, the BBC does educational content, and it's actually making your brain round and your eyes round. It's not making your eyes square.
The only reason that advert exists is because every single child who had a television was traumatized by one of their parents telling them that they'll get square eyes.
Yeah,
I got
you'll
it.
get square eyes if you.
My mum told me I'd get square eyes.
Yeah, same. And now I get hideous migraines all the time.
Oh, I'm
gonna go back to staring at my 3 monitors.
Nowadays, she doesn't give a shit. Anyway, it was just so entertaining. That the message was. Not the message, but like the villain of the week was like, hey, TVs and screens have been turning everyone incredibly hateful, which I kind of wished was more nuanced, in the way that it's like, it's a propaganda tool, and like the internet, I get, is an environment that turns people into hateful creatures. That is honestly, that like the modern day internet especially, like it's so hard to use the internet without being exposed to that kind of thing. But like screens in general, they don't necessarily turn people more hateful. It's more like that they're just very good tools to make people more hateful. Like you make a movie that is in some way racist or discriminatory or like, you know, homophobic or whatever, and you air it, and that's gonna like affect people, because it is an effective tool of like propaganda, and not just like, oh, screens exist, must be awful. It's like, well, you can do really good things with screen. Like you can do incredibly, like, think about all the things you've learned because we have electronic screens, about all the, like, you know, information that can be shared, and you know, communication with the world, and sharing people's like issues or movements or whatever the fuck. But you know, I was pretty happy to have it be just like the villain is hate speech, which was also great because the toy maker himself, most of the episode, when you meet him and see him, he's doing this like, oh, welcome to my toy shop. Oh, you want Stooky Bill or a doll for your television screen? Oh, but he will be so sad without Stooky Sue and his Stooky babies. They won't be able to sleep at night. You're not going to buy them. And you're like, is this man is obviously like doing a stereotype. And then his accent breaks at one point in that first conversation he has when he's doing this accent, and then he goes back to doing it, and it is obviously meant to be this like he's making fun of them. And then the next time we see him, he shows up, he's doing these like funny little twirly dances amidst everyone like losing their shit in the streets of London. Toymaker's wearing like a top hat and tailcoat, doing little ballroom waltzes, and then he grabs the doctor and is like, oh, hello monsieur, would you like to do a little dance with me? Oh, this is such a fun time. And it's like he's doing like a French stereotypical thing, which I know I'm also doing the voices, but I'd like to at least acknowledge that they are very stereotypical, like stupid. Yeah. But I think it's very entertaining that the toy maker, like, himself is this like hateful, spiteful creature, and he kind of shows it by pretending to do these voices and these like different sort of personas, which are stereotypical caricatures. And I think some of the evil brain TV burning mind affecting thing, some of what that was doing was making people emphasize that part of themselves like more, because we see it when I forgot the name of her, but the unit leader lady, she takes off her like safety band to be affected by it, and she basically just starts saying really hateful things to all the minorities in the room, where she's like, she takes it out on Shirley, who's in a wheelchair, and she's like, but you can stand up, can't you? Which is a very common like grievance actually for disabled people that who are in wheelchairs, which is that like, yeah, they can stand up for a bit because they can, you know, stand up to reach a shelf to get something off the shelf, but they can't do it all day all the time. It's like the wheelchair is still needed, and I mean, I thought that was a cool inclusion, but I just think it's great that basically the enemy of this episode was hate speech, and the toy maker himself was constantly embodying caricatures and like, oh, I'm gonna play as this person for a little bit, but based on my like internal, all my assumptions, and like doing it in a very spiteful, hateful way instead of, you know, recognizing the humanity of people or whatever. I just think that's great, and that's my rant. Mostly done for now. Thank you for coming to view screen.
Yes, I agree. I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think you've summed it up beautifully. I think they did a very good job.
I'm rereading my notes. It was just so much fun. It was just he was such a fun character. I hope they keep serving cunt like he does.
Yeah.
It's a...
I do think he was a beautifully done character. He did give me like I was thinking while I was watching it, I was like, he did give me like that sort of like big, like when he like came into the sort of he came into the Q not Q, that's not, so he gave me like Q energy from Star Trek, except like more cunty and more like well, because Q was a bit of a cunt at certain points, but he was like a lot more like even sillier and more over the top and more like high budget dancing.
The dancing and the like facial.
Q did some like big silly dancey like mariachi band stuff, but Q was also, you know, facing off against Picard and was being all like, I'm going to be very serious. Whereas the Toymaker was like, I'm just gonna fuck around. I don't care.
Toymaker, played by Neil Patrick Harris this episode, does an incredible job with him, by the way. Like, the facial expressions that he has this episode are just amazing. I think there's something to be said about how the Doctor this episode is like peaking with his like crisis of trauma and really just needing therapy so bad. Jesus Christ. And like a holiday, like a really like just time off. He just needs time off and therapy and a family and all of that. I think there's something to be said about how the Toymaker in this episode feels like, you know how David Tennant's Doctor behaves? It feels like the Toymaker shows up and is like, I'm you but stronger. You know, he's like more of that like some of that like chaotic franticness that Tennant's Doctor has.
Yeah.
But he's like, I think it's interesting because in a way he's a pretty good villain to have at this point in the Doctor's arc, because his whole thing is kind of about like the hate speech thing and how he acts. It's very reductionist. It's very like he's reducing people to simple elements. And this episode, the Doctor's really hitting this point of like, oh, hey, here's another villain. And once again, you know, for the umptillionth time in a row, you're having to save humanity from their own problem. Like, you know, humanity's done fucked up, and this whole thing is about how, like, oh, humanity's awful creatures and you're here to save them. And like he does have a bit of a crisis over it at one point where he's like, oh, it's so easy for you to be hateful. But I think it's kind of entertaining that the Toymaker's whole, as a villain, his whole like attack method is, I mean, apart from just straight killing people, he's like mentally torturing everyone, and he's like reducing them to their simplest elements and like reducing them to creatures of hate or reducing them to characters. And then he looks at the Doctor and he's like reducing the Doctor to all of the suffering that he's had, and is like, oh, the Doctor, oh, you run around and you never stop and you hate everyone and everyone you love dies. And he's like,
yes,
it's I think it's a really, really good villain to have had.
Yeah, he just straight up is like, oh, here's all your trauma. He's just like, oh, okay. It's just like straight up. Doesn't let him breathe. He's just like, hey, here's a room, here's all your trauma.
We literally have the scene where he's like, oh, the Doctor, here's all the times you were traumatized. How sad. Now I'm going to kill everyone you love.
Yeah. Oh, but they survived, kind of. Oh, well, that's okay then.
That's okay then for you, because they survived for you, like, in this way that's like so... Oh, it's great. He's a really, really good villain to have had. And this was leading up to yet another point I want to make, and I really hope I don't flub it. I think I've forgotten it. I think I've forgotten the point that I was leading up to this, and I got
It's
caught
flipped.
up in the fact that he is a great villain. This episode, I'll come back around to it. It's fine.
Oh my god, I got so annoyed at Kate. So the toy maker like goes into unit HQ and is like the doctor's like going, okay, so there's the villain, and there's basically nothing you can do because they exist outside of the laws of physics and you know, space and time and everything as you know them. They're like this omnipotent, omniscient being. There's absolutely nothing we can do against them at all. Like they're completely unbeatable. So there's nothing you can do, and they're like, how is that even possible? And then he's like, there's just not. And then some music starts playing, and they're like, where's that music coming from? Turn it off. And then the doctor's like, oh no, he's here. And then the toy maker comes in, starts doing this big dance, and then Kate's like, just shoot him. And the doctor's like, don't fucking shoot him. And then so they all start trying to shoot him, and obviously it doesn't work because the toy maker just turns all of their bullets into whatever the fuck, because he's just like this confetti, because he can't. It exists. The doctor just told them that you can't do anything to him, and I'm like, Kate, what are you doing? You're smarter than this, you big dumb. I'm like, and then she's like, you shoot him, or you start shooting at him, and I'm like, Kate, what are you doing? I was like, you're gonna get more people killed. What are you doing? I was like, for God's sake, you've been through more shit. Stop it.
Watching that scene, I felt like the fact that they all shot at the toy maker was, in a way, the toy maker showed up and suddenly we're in toy maker hell and everything is chaos. And like, she's like yelling at people to shoot him. And I'm like, that is out of character. But part of me think that it's toy maker's influence, which is driving her to make that decision. Like, I'm pretty happy with the, like, not even explaining it, just the toy maker shows up and someone tries to shoot him because they're scared, or it's the toy maker's influence or whatever. But really, the toy maker shows up and someone tries to shoot him because he needs people shooting at him for him to serve absolute cunt as he dances around the room. And that's why that happened. I'm like, I don't even think, like, the toy maker influenced him influenced her to. I think the toy maker shows up and people will shoot at him so that he can have confetti and, you know, balloons that turn people into balloons, and he can dance around and push people on the ground. And I'm like, I actually don't, like, if the doctor had started trying to shoot him, I would have been like, yeah, checks out. Like, because it's the toy maker and his whole thing is just like, he's here and everything is chaos. And I'm like, this makes sense. This is in character. That's how I felt about it. But I mean, you know, that's my and in case you can't tell, I fucking love this episode. This episode is, to me, absolutely incredible, and we haven't even gotten to the therapy.
I feel like got to confetti time, and then, like, as soon as we got past this bit, the episode fell off for me.
I mean, okay, at this point in the episode, there's like 10, 15 minutes left anyway.
There's still 20 minutes of the episode left.
20 minutes of the episode. Crazy. Well, some of that are credits, probably. But they have this confrontation, and I do think that, like, the themes and stuff and the chaos, it's still pretty chaotic, but at this point it's turned to, like, murder. Also, sorry, this is another thing. Just shout out to the whole, like, everyone turns into hateful creatures and everything immediately erupts into chaos, which is basically, if you look at, like, hey, remember when Trump and his fanboys invaded the Houses of Parliament and it was a ridiculous, insane clusterfuck? And they were all creatures of hate speech. Where I'm like, oh. And there was some other things like the Charlottesville rally, which was like an awful, awful thing that happened. And that was because a bunch of incredibly hateful people got together and it turned into a, like, incredibly violent thing. And I'm like, oh, this episode, everyone, like, becomes incredibly hateful and awful to each other, and they all, like, chaos just fucking erupts, and there's, like, violence everywhere. And I'm like, I'm like, oh, this is just RTD just shitting on like that like hateful way of being, which is very very delicious of them to to be doing that, at least to me. But we get outside and the playmaker, he's like co-opted the big gun that they used earlier in the episode, and he points it at them, and the doctor straight up just propositions him. He literally just goes, let's go off to the stars together as immortal beings, and we can just be together forever. Like, the doctor, against this terrible, terrible villain, goes, let's just go become gay lovers in space. We can just be gay, immortal gods together. And then he gets rejected, which is, I thought, an absolutely incredible turn for this episode. Like that. That truly just blew me away a little bit. I thought it was hilarious.
The Doctor's not allowed to be gay. We've learnt that from the BBC.
I mean, at this point, who knows? How many men do you think Shooty's gonna kiss?
None. If we're not allowed Yaz and the Doctor, then Shooty's not allowed to kiss any men.
Have you seen the trailer for the Christmas special?
No.
We were talking about it. It's gonna be good. But he gets outside, propositions him for gay love, gets shot down, the Toymaker shoots him. I can't remember how... It feels like that scene was long, but I think that's because there were just a lot of things that happened on that roof. And then the regeneration happens, and shout out to the Doctor's like, oh, here we go, and then he stops. Like he starts going, and then it stops, and he's like, oh, I need you to. I'm like, when it stops,
yes,
I'm
I was
like
crying because he gets shot by the laser and he starts regenerating, and I was like, well, here we go. I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, he's like, here we go again, Alonzi, and then he starts going, and then he stops, and I'm like, oh, it happens to everyone, babe. And then he goes, I need you to pull, and I'm like, oh, performance anxiety. It does happen to everyone. Oh god. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is erectile dysfunction the word I'm looking for? No, I think it's just performance anxiety. You know, it's the like he's having a hard time getting the energy up, you know, like that's what the scene is. And then he says, "Can you pull?" And I'm like,
oh gosh.
I'm like, oh my god. He's having a moment. It's amazing. And then they pull on him, and fucking Shooty pops out of his body. Instead of regenerating, they pull Shooty out of him, and also they're attached to the hip for a bit, which is, you know, totally no homoerotic undertones there. Then they, you know, push on each other to get each other out. And then we have Shooty and the Doctor, and I'm crying, and I'm in tears, and I'm like, this is incredible. I can't wait to see what happens next. Does he get to stay? Does he get to... I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then they play catch, which is cool. I think we sort of discussed it earlier. I think, you know, I think the fact that they kind of just like chill out and play a game of catch with each other and have a lot of fun doing it, is part of why they beat,
well, I thought it was weird. Because I like, we've had some things where it was like the Doctor and the Doctor, but then I thought, I don't know, because they were like, it was weird. It was weird.
They called it bi-generation.
It was weird, though.
It's the most bisexual thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, but it was weird.
RTD, Tennant, Shooty, Turn Up are literally just like, we're going to win against hate speech with the power of homosexuality. We're going to bring flamboyant, flaming gays to the table, and they're going to win.
But I don't I don't like it.
I fucking love it. I think it's a
No, I don't. I don't like it.
I think it's perfect. It's a perfect like summation of the kind of energy and approach that they're gonna be like having going forward, which is just so much more fun and interesting, and stuff actually like developing and changing and interesting things like happening in this world, which is great. And I was just like, oh, it was amazing.
I didn't like. Okay. So I don't like the change to the canon where the Doctor can now just split into two randomly. Okay. I don't like the change the thing where the Doctor and the new Doctor were just like there's two of them, but they just acted so massively differently from one another. It was kind of strange. Thank you.
It's
They keep killing my TED
sci-fi,
talk.
baby.
Because
They can
we've
do
had
whatever
like
they
the
want.
Doctor and the Doctor, like we've had two Doctors. Like, listen, okay. So we've had. I recently watched a Doctor and Doctor episode. I watched the I watched Matt Smith's Doctor, and there was an episode where there's two Matt Smith Doctors, and obviously they acted exactly the same as each other because they were two Matt Smith Doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've had other episodes of the Doctors interacting with each other where there are multiple, like, different era Doctors, and they all act like themselves. But since we haven't seen any of Ncuti's Doctor, and we have nothing to go on, so when he just pops out, it's just weird seeing Ncuti's Doctor acting with Tennant's Doctor, where it's just
This
a
might
completely new Doctor,
come as a surprise.
and it's just like
That's Ncuti's Doctor acting as Ncuti. That's Ncuti's Doctor.
yeah,
He's being the Doctor.
yeah, but we've never seen him before, so we just see them pop out, and then they just.
Alright, do you want me to talk about
we just
we've
see
gone
them
to the
acting for like 15 minutes of the episode, bouncing off of the new Doctor, bouncing off of Tennant's Doctor. But so they have to like then carry the last 15 minutes of the episode bouncing off of each other really awkwardly because we've never seen them before, and I'd rather they either
In what way was that awkward?
it kind of sucked. I'd rather see them either straight up carry the last 15 minutes of the episode alone, or just have Tennant's Doctor be there. I hated them bouncing off of each other because it felt really clumsy.
I have.
Because
Do you know what I think this
felt,
was?
I felt like I never got room to get comfortable with Ncuti's Doctor.
Okay. Just briefly, every other single Doctor who has showed up in their regeneration episode, they've showed up and said a line and the episode is ended. This is the most amount of screen time we've gotten from a new Doctor in the episode where they get regenerated into, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Like, this is
and
above and beyond.
I hate it. I'd rather have...
Oh, I thought it was paced really well.
No, I'd rather have an entire... I'd rather have to not be there because it ruined the pacing of the episode. Because I'd rather have the actual episode be
Would you like me to
finished.
explain?
I know I don't. It doesn't need explaining. And the episode sucked because the episode needed to be finished by the Doctor, and not wrapped up by having another Doctor shoved in, and because instead of like actually having the episode finished, I then had to sort of sit here going and sort of watching the last 15 minutes of this episode going, man, I'm trying to figure out whether or not I'm into Ncuti's Doctor or not. And that's why I spent the last 15 minutes of the episode going, I don't know if I'm into Ncuti's Doctor yet or not. And that's why I did it for the last... Instead of watching the story, I was going, don't know how I'm feeling about this.
It feels like a... That just feels like a vibe. If you don't like the vibes, then sure.
Well, because I don't know because I don't know if I like the vibes yet because I only got to see 10 minutes of his fucking doctor because they stuck 10 minutes of his doctor into the end of this episode. Whereas the episode should have been just wrapped up with Tennant's doctor, and then I could have had an hour of vibes in the next episode at Christmas, where I can actually sit down and enjoy an entire hour of vibes. Because when I actually get to have an entire hour of vibes next week, I'll actually get to know whether or not I'm enjoying the vibes before we strap in for an entire season of vibes when the next season comes out. Instead of 10 minutes of bouncing off of each other vibes. Because it's not even a full 10 minutes of actual Doctor leading the conversation vibes. It's 10 minutes of the Doctor sharing a thing with another Doctor vibes.
Can I give my perspective on this?
Yeah.
In my opinion, Ncuti shows up with the power of homosexuality and self-love and acceptance. And is the way his Doctor is, or is this episode, and will probably be quite a lot of going forward, is like the perfect response to the trauma that the Doctor is going through, the Tennant Doctor time is going through, because what happens after they beat the villain is Ncuti just gives him a really fucking big hug and a kiss, and like is very warm and soft and tender, and I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, here's a queer man. Here's a queer man who's gone through struggles and gone through a journey of self-acceptance, who has showed up to a Doctor who is having a horrible time, like, of himself and his whole, like, journey, and being unable to sit with himself and talk about it for any seconds. And we've brought a flaming homosexual to the scene who understands what it's like to be there and is, like, the perfect person to have to like be helping. And I'm like, oh, that's the perfect person for the Doctor to regenerate into in this situation, because it's somebody who knows themselves and loves themselves and accepts it. And I'm just like, oh, this is perfect. And like the vibes are kind of amazingly on point because they're having a great time together. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And you know, they resolve the Doctor, the like trauma that the Doctor was going through, which in my opinion, if he had just regenerated it all away into Ncuti's Doctor, wouldn't have, like, I can't see, it doesn't make sense for me to have had the Doctor go, oh, I'm gonna chill and I'm gonna stop, and then we'll regenerate into Ncuti. Like, that doesn't make, like, it doesn't feel right for Ncuti, where it's like, that feels like a big thing to have happened in such a short span of time. Whereas this, to me, the way it ended was a perfect way of being like, hey, Ncuti's here now because we're not waiting for Ncuti. And he's gonna be amazing, and we're bringing him in now because this, like, the Doctor is, like, so traumatized that he's basically falling apart at the seams this episode, and he almost needs a second Doctor to be here to solve this problem, which he kind of can no longer deal with himself anyway. And like, he's the wrong person to beat the Toymaker, kind of a thing. And I just thought it was amazing. Especially when it's like, oh, his whole thing this episode is like him dealing with his own trauma and him like trying to not being able to talk about it and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, we brought someone who has that self-love and acceptance, but also that's the second Doctor who, they're both the same person. They know themselves, and like, it's, talk about a actual metaphor for being able to talk to yourself about things. He has a conversation with himself about some of the shit he's gone through, where Ncuti is like, we fought the gods of Ragnarok. The moment that really got me is Ncuti's like, Sarah Jane is gone. And they're both like, I loved her. I'm gonna cry thinking about it. I'm just like, I thought it was absolutely perfect and a perfect way to resolve this like the like arc that he's been going through in these specials that has been following on through like all the series of things. It's like he gets to have therapy at the end, and he gets to, you know, still be the person who flies off, because the one who flies off is someone who, like, rather than just regenerating the problems away, he's going to acknowledge them, and he can still do both of those things. And because it's sci-fi, they can just do that. Let's be honest, it's sci-fi. They can invent whatever the fuck they want. And to me, it's like, as long as it's fun, I don't, and it's like a good story. In turn, when I say story, like good, like, you know, the themes and the chaos, and like this episode with all the hate speech stuff, and then the Doctor's like acceptance journey, like set in the beautiful theater of sci-fi, of Doctor Who sci-fi. I'm like, I think it's great. I thought it was amazing. I was like, okay, now, like, we'll get to know Ncuti more in his episode, but it was a perfect fit for him to show up here and just homosexual all over the place, and be the person who could, you know, tell the Doctor to breathe.
I feel like they could have just had, if they wanted a nice end for Tennant's Doctor to sit and relax and have a family with Donna and everybody, he could have just done that and lived out his life with the family, because he lives for fucking ever. And then he could have gone off and regenerated into Ncuti's Doctor afterward, and had all of his trauma resolved, and had a little bit of therapy, and we didn't have to split into two. That's my opinion.
Yes. But then we wouldn't have gotten Ncuti standing around in his underpants for like 15 minutes with nobody commenting on it.
Yep.
And like all of the scenes, and the scene where he picks up a hammer and smashes the second TARDIS out in just the like gayest possible way.
Yeah. That's right. And we wouldn't have had two TARDISes rolling around for no reason.
I think the fact that
I hate
they
it.
did it this way.
I hated it, Overlite. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. I'm not gonna lie. I hate the two Doctors thing. I hated it. I hate the two TARDIS thing.
The fact that they did it this way, to me,
I hate it.
Is...
That's it. I'm one of those people.
Well, thank you for coming to VScreen.
That's it. I'm one of those people. I'm on the Reddit. Hey, the Master's back though.
There's the Master's back. Yay! That was a small note. I think the fact that they chose to do it this way was like a sign of the writers of the show saying, "Hey, we're not afraid
they don't
to
give a shit about
like
just
interesting
destroying everything." Yeah.
Do you want them to fix? Do you want them to wade into the absolute shit fest that is all of the stuff that happened between Tennant and Tennant, and go around with a fucking wrench and start fixing everything hand by hand? Do you want that?
Fixing everything? Well, I don't think they're fixing anything.
They'd have to redo it. They'd have to like I'm so much happier in the world where they show up and are like, you know what, we're gonna address the parts that we want to address that creatively are interesting and enjoyable
I think
to watch.
it's nice that they actually
acknowledged
everything, and then they just came along and they were like, okay, and then we're gonna sort of also go fuck you to sort of any sort of pre-existing sort of stuff and just sort of shit all over Doctor Who.
I think it was there. I think it was just like they did it. The fact they did it this way is a message of them saying like, hey, this is how we're going to do things going forward, in a way that I thought was really fun and entertaining, and still told
I don't know,
a good story.
This is the bit I'm like really pissed off about. It's just the sort of splitting in two thing. I actually really hate it.
I thought it was hilarious. They called it by generation.
I know.
I
really hate it.
was gold.
I really don't like it.
Solid comedy
Like
storytelling gold.
any other thing about splitting the Doctor in two, like I'm perfectly fine with, like sort of cloney things or anything else, but just like randomly fucking splitting them in two while they're regenerating, I'm just like absolutely not on board with it all.
I think it's great.
I thought it was stupid. I think it would have been fine if they both regenerated while it was happening. I think I'd have been fine with it.
Okay, so the bit you're mad about is the way that it happened.
Yeah.
The fact that he mitosis the second Doctor. That's
Yeah. And stayed at the same and just sort of spoofed a second Doctor out.
That's the okay. I think that is a very funny angle to take, but you know,
Oh, he's just like, oh, I got killed, but it's okay because I'm not. I'll just keep my perfectly killed body and I'll spoof a second Doctor out. Oh, problem solved. I could have done that every other time, any point, and it would have been fine. And I could have just shit out 60,000 clone Doctors at any point in my life. There would have been thousands of. Yeah, we could have repopulated Gallifrey with 60,000 million Doctors.
if they want to have it be a significant plot point that the Doctor, the biogeneration is new and that it's caused some weird effects, then they can. And honestly, they probably will address it in some way.
I think the Doctor, Tennant's Doctor will show up at some point, having gone through some trauma. They'll re-merge back together again.
I don't really. If they do that, then they do that. It'll be fun and stuff, or like, I don't know. It's silly, goofy, fun space show. I'm like, if it's a good story and a good time, then yeah, sure, baby, whatever. But we get to have domesticated David Tennant with Donna and found family. In the oh my god, sorry, Doctor Who's showing up being incredibly gay, and then Tennant's ending being found family gets me real good. Shout out to all of my gays for that. You know what I'm talking about if you're listening. Maybe Viztee might not know what I'm talking about.
What?
Found family.
I love found family.
The themes, a common thing for LGBT people to really enjoy found family because their own families aren't as accepting, and so having like the idea of like finding a family that loves you, also a thing that does actually happen in real life, of like forming very strong bonds and friendships and having a found family because their own family is not as accepting, that whole thing, and the fact that happens to Doctor basically this episode, it's pretty great.
I felt like the Doctor just the Doctor just needs to just talk to people and open up. That's always been the Doctor's problem. Got all this trauma, has all the companions there, just never opens up,
I think that's what they say this episode, is that fundamentally the person who chooses to be running across the galaxy is always going to struggle, or not always, but like is going to struggle with like living that lifestyle of like starfaring adventurer is a difficult lifestyle to lead, and also like have self-acceptance and being able to have some therapy about it. All right, brief post notes. Wheelchair accessible, baby!
It finally happened.
TARDIS is wheelchair accessible now. I watched the behind the scenes. The actor for Shirley started crying when talking about it being wheelchair accessible. It was so sweet, and it was so like, apparently RTD got a letter from a fan who loved Doctor Who, but was like sad that the thing wasn't wheelchair accessible, and he was like, oh, let's make it wheelchair accessible. Let's do that right now, Lamal. We can do whatever we want. Which was amazing.
Yeah, it seems like such a simple thing as well. So it's like, why did we never just add a ramp before?
Great. It's great.
Just flips down.
Representation wins. Shout out to the end scene with Rose and Donna. Oh, that's what I was gonna say earlier. When they pull Shooty out of the doctor, I know you hate it, but the ginger, the older ginger lady, she looks at Shooty and she goes, "You are beautiful." In like the most, just the like, oh, my heart in that moment was just like something about like an older generation accepting this like newer doctor, first black doctor, incredibly like queer, and Shooty apparently is also queer in some regards, which is cool. Good for him. Just like incredibly flamboyant, and then to have like a member of the older generation just look at him and be like, "Well, this is amazing," in like the most wonderful way possible. That was genuine. That made me so happy. That line. But yeah, the found family is great. The fucking the stories, possible like spin-off potential is fun. Just for like if they want to tell some stories or whatever, with Tennant and Rose.
Obviously they've been doing a lot of audio booky kind of Donna 10 stories anyway, so potentially they'll be doing more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's weird. I'm not at all opposed to the idea of like this version of a Doctor Who verse. I think it's because it's the entire thing it doesn't feel like a vehicle for them to sell things. It feels like a vehicle for them to tell fun and interesting stories with, you know, traumatized Doctor, beloved Donna Noble, their incredibly transgender child / niece.
Right, Doctor goes to the pub.
My favorite audiobook. I think the idea that Rose could come back via like Tennant, that's really exciting for me. But like the whole family being really nice, and it just like I think it expands more space for it to be more of like a concrete world where it's like, oh, the old companions aren't just gonna be forgotten and abandoned on the wayside. If they want to do more episodes with them because they have a fun creative idea, then they just can. Like that's what this like that ending for me is a vehicle for them to be like, oh, hey, we've had this sick ass idea, and we can use this whole other thing we've got going on as a mechanism for that to happen. Like they could bring back Eccleston, they could bring back Smith or Capaldi or Whittaker if they want. Like,
what?
Well, they could. That's what it's saying to me, is that like in some way they could just bring them back for a fun single episode if they have a good idea. We could have an episode where Whittaker Doctor shows up to Yaz, and they get to have
What?
and they get to that would, and it would make sense and it would fit in the universe.
What?
We could have an episode where Whittaker Doctor gets to like confess to Yaz, and they get to like have a moment together.
No, it's too late.
No, they could be like some fucking old
No,
Doctor machine that brings them back, and they get to like hold hands and stare at the sunset.
That's not a thing. It's not a thing. There's no old Doctor machine. She can't come back.
And it makes me very excited.
It's not a thing.
Very excited. And also the fact that they did it makes me know that they're willing to just do whatever they want. And as long as it's, you know, they can tell some fun stories, it's going to be great, and Disney's giving them a shitload of money to do it, so, you know, yay!
Yeah, a teaser for the next... I did kind of see some of the teasers for the next thing, and it does look pretty budgety.
Oh, yeah, the budget has been... Oh, that's... The puppets this episode were incredible. They like, handmade, like, all the... They had physical puppets, but, like, they've had physical tech for all of this, which is absolutely incredible because it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, the budget for this season, well, I think
It's off the
it just really
charts.
helped because they've only had 3 episodes, so I think that's really helped instead of doing their like 14 episode seasons or whatever they used to be.
Yeah.
Like condensing it all down into 3 little short things has really, really, really helped us do these big high budget episodes.
In conclusion, we are so back. Doctor Who is so back, baby. Oh my god.
I mean, in my opinion, though, episode 1, that was of these 3 episodes, peak.
No.
Episode 2,
Disagree.
episode 2, pretty good. That was number 2. Episode 3, definitely the worst.
Episode 3 was the greatest by far for me.
No, episode 3 was definitely the worst. I don't think Shooty should have really been in it at all. It was supposed to be Tennant's climax episode, and I feel like they should have just left Shooty out of it.
It was perfect.
Nope.
And
I agree.
How else would he have gotten to appreciate the shit that the things that Tennant's Doctor went through and the other Doctors too? Like, it was more climactic for the fact that he was able to acknowledge it, because otherwise he would have just been monologuing, which, to be fair, I think Tennant could do because he's a really fucking good actor. But, like, the fact that Shooty was there created that space for Tennant to, like, live and experience that.
Donna. He should have talked to Donna.
He could have.
Yeah.
It would have been different, because she can't understand as much, and he wouldn't have been able to actually acknowledge, like, some of the things that happened. It would have just been like, oh, it's been so much, you know. Oh, so like it's harder for him. He would be like, oh, Sarah Jane, and Donna would be like, who? Sarah who? They probably met once, but so.
He could have just talked to Donna. It would have been the same.
I'm hand waving.
No. It upset me.
Anyway, Viztee, baby.
Yep. Viztee.
Thank you for listening to this episode, which I enjoyed so much. It was amazing. Viztee is standing in the corner, staring staring
Yep.
sad,
Hatefully.
sad, disappointed, didn't like it, daggers.
Uh-huh.
I'm like literally doing like backflips and disco dancing across the room in celebration. It was great. Oh my god, one episode. So good. Thank you for listening. Viztee, do you want to say anything?
Bye.
Yeah.
Woo!
Got him.